Our delegation was co-led by Jerry Condon, who's the Vice President of Veterans for Peace. He's not able to be here. He's active right now in Seattle, Washington, where he lives, in that area. Two other members of the delegation are unable to be here. Judy Bellow, who lives in Rochester, and Vanessa Beeley, who is an independent journalist who has returned to Syria to report directly what she is seeing as she investigates further the truth of what's happening in Syria. I think what Alfred said is so true. We are fighting a mass of propaganda that has demonized the Syrian government, demonized its leaders, an effort that precedes every other intervention that the United States has made over the course of many, many decades in order to convince people that it's okay for quote-unquote humanitarian reasons to overthrow a government and to replace it with whatever. The United States prefers a government that is not independent, that is a willing participant in what the whatever U.S. policy is. So what we saw in Damascus and what we saw in the two villages we visited outside Damascus belies the propaganda that has overwhelmed us. It's hard. It's hard for even those of us who have been in the peace movement for a long time. It's hard for us to ignore this propaganda. It is so well orchestrated. We spoke to members of industry, the Chamber of Industry. We spoke to leaders in the student union, the National Student Union. We spoke with NGOs that are involved in taking care of the orphans of those who have died in this war on both sides. They don't discriminate. Orphans are orphans. Whatever side they were fighting on, these young people have to be taken care of. We spoke with an NGO that trains women who don't have a skill in sewing because they lost the breadwinner in their family. We spoke to an NGO where they're trying to deal with reconciliation and trying to make sure that supplies get to those areas of the country that are under the control of the terrorists, the mercenaries. And we make a distinction between opposition, the political opposition with whom we also met, and the terrorists and the mercenaries with whom we did not meet. We met people in Syria who work nonviolently to bring about change. We learned of their efforts to bring about change, working in opposition to the government, working with the government, but nonviolently. We met with government officials. We met with the Minister of Administration. We met with the Ministry of Health. We met with the Minister of Reconciliation. A whole approach to bringing back those Syrians who have, for one reason or another, joined the mercenaries and the terrorists. And my fellow delegates will speak, I think, about some of the details of these. But I want to give you just an overview of whom we met with. We saw for ourselves the damage that was done to the university. Even while we were there, a shell fell into the School of Architecture, killing students and faculty. and the students themselves were rebuilding the damage. We saw villages that are basically Christian villages that have been besieged by the terrorists but have now been liberated. And the damage done to a shrine in a village called Malula, which is a village where they still speak Aramaic, the language of Jesus, and the attacks on the Christian population. One of the things I bring back, there are two things I want to mention finally that we feel are really important. One is that while the United States would like to divide the Syrians up by religion or within a religion, by the different beliefs within that religion, there wasn't a Syrian we talked to who would accept that. We spoke to the Grand Mufti, and he said, people ask me how many Muslims there are in Syria, and his response is always 23 million. That's the population of Syria. And when we talked to the bishop of one of the Orthodox churches, he answered the same thing. The number of Christians is 23 million. We will not allow ourselves to be divided up the way the United States has divided up the people of Iraq or Libya or Afghanistan or so many other countries. We won't allow that. And that unity, I believe, has led to the ability of the Syrians to withstand an invasion by the most powerful country in the world and its most powerful allies in Europe, its most powerful allies in the Middle East, with what is a vicious attack on the Syrian people. The second is the sanctions. I have to admit that I did not know before I went that the United States has imposed sanctions on Syria in a way that's similar to the sanctions that the United States imposed on Iraq in the 1990s in order to weaken that country and that government that the United States admits killed 500,000 children in Iraq during the 1990s sanctions. That set of sanctions, means that the Syrian people cannot get medicines that they desperately need. They cannot get factory parts that they need to maintain their economy. They can't get infant formula and many other things. Their students cannot go abroad. Their lawyers are separated from the rest of the international legal system because of those sanctions. These sanctions are not reported in the U.S. media, to my knowledge, and we need to know about them. Another way to weaken, these sanctions are another way to weaken the Syrian government and the Syrian state. So that's my overview.